Welcome to AS London Wellness Academy. Today's video lecture is on the cardiovascular system, or otherwise known as the circulatory system. Now, the circulatory system is the human body's transport system. Now, this system is made up of blood vessels, and the heart. The blood transports nutrients and oxygen to the cells in the body where it is actually needed. The blood transports waste products away from the cells, and blood vessels are where the blood is moved around the body. Now, the heart acts as this pump, keeping the blood flowing through the network of vessels. Now, the circulatory system uses and relies on an intricate transport system. Now, this transport system is actually made up of your arteries, veins, and smaller capillaries. The circulatory system as a whole works to keep the capillaries supplied with a sufficient level of blood which is actually needed. So let's look at this transport system. Arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. The blood in your arteries is under a high pressure in order to ensure vital oxygen gets to where it is actually needed. Now, your arteries do have a thick muscular wall. These are elastic, and this is so that it withholds the high pressure that blood travels under. Your arteries are usually deep within the body, and they form smaller vessels called arterioles. Now, these deliver blood to capillaries. Your function of arteries is that its systemic arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart to the body, and your pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood to the lungs. Now, looking at veins then, they carry deoxygenated blood back towards the heart, and the blood in the veins is under a low pressure. Veins have a less thick muscular wall, and they do have valves. Now, this ensures that your blood flows in one direction only, and that's the difference between arteries. Now, your veins are generally nearer the surface, and they form smaller vessels called venules. Moving on to capillaries, these are the smallest vessel. They join arterioles and venules, forming a network in the tissues. Blood carried through a capillary is under low pressure, but it is still slightly higher than if it was carried through a vein. Now, your capillaries are very, very thin. They only have a 1 cell thick wall, and this actually does allow the exchange of essential nutrients to reach cells in the body. And also, it can pick up waste products such as carbon dioxide and urea to pass out of the cells back into the blood. Your function of a capillary is that it distributes essential oxygen and nutrients to most parts of the body. However, it doesn't supply deep within the brain, hyaline cartilage, and the epidermis. So let's look at your function of blood. It carries oxygen from the lungs to the cells of the body via your red blood cells, and it carries carbon dioxide from the cells back to the lungs to oxygenate the blood. It carries nutrients such as glucose, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals to cells within the body, and it will carry away waste products such as your water, carbon dioxide, lactic acid, and urea away from the cells to be excreted out of the body. Now, your blood also does transport hormones to target organs so that they can work efficiently. Now, blood also has a defence function. So you have your leukocytes, which are your white blood cells, and these play a major part in your immune system. These are large, irregular shaped cells that do contain a nucleus. And on average, you have 80,000 leukocytes per milliliter of blood, but these number will increase due to infection. These leukocytes are produced in bone marrow. Now, your white blood cells and antibodies' aim is to combat disease and fight off any infection. Another function of blood is regulation, so it helps to regulate the heat in the body. Your liver and your muscles are your main generators of heat, and the blood can absorb this quantity of heat, and it will then be transported around the body so that your body contains a steady temperature. Your blood will also regulate the pH balance. Now, clotting. The blood actively clots when the skin is damaged, and it prevents us from losing too much blood and prevents bacteria getting into the blood vessels. Platelets actively clot the blood. So with blood clotting, you have thrombocytes, which are easily damaged, and if a blood vessel wall is broken, they disintegrate and release an enzyme called thromboplastin. Now, your thromboplastin then converts a plasmin protein called prothrombin into an active enzyme called thrombin. Now, you do need calcium for this process to actually work. Your thrombin then changes another plasma protein, fibrinogen, into fibrin, and this is insoluble, and it will form a covering to actually cover the damaged vessel. So as your blood will try to flow through this covered vessel, the red and white blood cells and platelets are trapped, which will form your blood clot. So let's move on then, and we're going to be looking and recapping now on your arteries and your veins. So let's look at the differences. Oxygenated blood in an artery and deoxygenated blood in a vein, obviously with the exception of a pulmonary artery and a pulmonary vein. You have arteries have thicker walls and veins have thinner walls. Arteries are round, veins are oval. Arteries carry blood under high pressure and veins carry blood under a low pressure. Your artery vessels leave the heart and your vein vessels enter the heart. Arteries do not contain valves and your veins do. So you have your arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules and veins. You have your main arteries and veins of the body, your carotid, which is either of the two main arteries in the neck, which branches to supply the head and the neck, subclavian, which are the two arteries supplying blood to the neck and the arms, brachial, which is an artery that extends from the axillary artery at the armpit, down the side and inner surface of the arm to the elbow. It will then divide into the radial and ulnar arteries and into the palmar arches of the hand. You have the iliac arteries that supply most of the blood to the lower limbs and the pelvic region. Femoral artery arises from the iliac artery into the inguinal ligament. It is situated superficially, running down the front of the medial aspect of the thigh. And 2/3 of the way down, it passes into the back of the thigh, which goes beyond the knee as the popliteal artery, and onto the anterior and posterior tibial artery, and then onto the plantar arches of the foot. So we're going to have a look at the cardiac cycle now. So the following sequence of events takes place during the process of a contraction. So blood pours in from the superior and inferior vena cava and pulmonary vein, filling the left and right atria. A wave of contraction spreads over the muscles of the atria, causing blood to empty into the ventricles. When the ventricles are full, they contract on an impulse, forcing the blood into the systemic and pulmonary circulation. Then you have your bicuspid and the tricuspid valves. These are closed during the contraction, and the semiluminar valves guard the aorta and pulmonary artery will become open. This contraction is called a systole and lasts from 0.4 of a second. The period of rest where there is no contraction lasts 0.4 of a second and is called a diastole. Now the cardiac cycle lasts 0.8 of a second, which is half working and half resting. Now you have a portal circulation, which concerns the blood that's supplied to and removed from the organs of digestion. You have the celiac artery, which supplies the stomach, spleen, pancreas and liver. Now these arteries break into capillaries in the organs which they supply, and the capillaries unite in the usual way to form your veins. The individual vein form the stomach, spleen and intestines in turn to unite to form one large vein called the portal vein. Now this carries all the blood to the liver. Here in the liver, the portal vein breaks up into smaller veins and finally into the capillaries. Now these capillaries in the liver again unite to form the two groups of hepatic veins which leave the liver to join the inferior vena cava. Now the portal vein, unlike other veins in the body, both commence and end with capillaries. The importance of this is that digested food in the alimentary canal are absorbed into these capillaries, which will go on to the portal vein and are carried to the liver, where it then ends into a second set of capillary for easy absorption. Now, the pulmonary circulation, so that you have the blood which passes into the right ventricle from the vena cava, which controls and pushes it into the pulmonary artery. This divides to carry blood to the left and right lung. In the lungs, each artery breaks up into smaller arterioles and then into the pulmonary capillaries. These surround the alveoli. This is where the blood takes up oxygen and gives off your carbon dioxide. Now the pulmonary capillaries then unite to form venules, then veins, and blood is returned to the heart via 4 pulmonary veins which empty into the left atrium. Then goes to the left ventricles which contract, pumps into the aorta to begin your systemic circulation. Now your systemic circulation is the circulation from the heart to the body. The blood first leaves the heart via the aorta, which is your largest artery, and feeds the body with oxygen and returns to the heart via the inferior and superior vena cava, your largest veins. We're now moving on to looking at blood. So blood colour varies minute by minute and place to place. A fluid tissue contained within a closed system of vessels known as arteries, veins and capillaries. Blood circulates through the pumping action of the heart, and it is your chief transport system of the body. Blood forms 7.9% of the total body weight, and it appears as a viscous red fluid, but if examined closely, it consists of a plasma. Now, plasma is mostly water, which is 90 to 92%, plasma proteins, mineral salts such as sodium chloride, iron, copper and iodine, nutrients, which mostly come from digested food and are absorbed from intestines, and these will be used by your cell tissue for energy repair and cell reproduction, organic waste, such as urea and uric acid, hormones, which are your chemical messages produced by the endocrine glands, and your plasma will transport them to various organs so they influence organ activity, antibodies and gases. Join us on your next video so that you can look at your heart in more detail.